Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And Josh, Suzanne, and Matt, I'm very happy to have you here. I think virtual experiences has been such a popular phrase, obviously, for nearly the past year now. And it's kind of funny looking back on the past months of pandemic. We've been almost, like I said, a year now. When we first hosted our Crafty Professionals conference in early April, just interacting with people on the internet was just a very, very bizarre experience virtually. I think we were still learning how to do things. And I'm really excited to talk about today how we've come far from, that point in time, but how we can also continue to use these virtual experiences to just better our companies, better our breweries, and just really just connect with people and have that human aspect. But first, Josh, let's start with you. If you could just tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Andrew. I'm really excited to talk about virtual events, which are obviously very relevant today. But my name is Josh Lindsay. I am the brewery educator at Karbach Brewing Company. So I like to say I have one of the cooler jobs around the brewery in the sense that I get the opportunity to drink beer and talk about it, put a little jingle in my pocket for doing so. So I absolutely love connecting with not only consumers, but also our retail partners, our wholesalers and distributors, and industry professionals, as well as our staff. So with everything that's been going on, it's obviously a little bit challenging to get in front of people and toast a pint in person. So it's been quite the experience to learn this side of the business. And I'm excited to share some of my experiences as well as learn from these other two, both Suzanne and Matt on the panel.
I'm excited to learn about some of your successes and failures through the pandemic. And now, Suzanne, you are up. It's always good to see you. Tell everybody else about what you do in the industry.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Henricksen. I'm the founder of the Crafty Cask, and we are all about celebrating and supporting craft alcohol makers. And in 2020, like everyone else, we had to figure out what the heck that meant now that we couldn't go to bars and distilleries and cider houses and all that good stuff and breweries. And so we pivoted and we basically host virtual events for craft makers. And so we're big believers that having a third party say, hey, we really love this beer, come meet the maker, come talk with us, and us kind of leading that conversation for you is really valuable. So we do that. And then we also do a ton of corporate events. And let me tell you guys, corporate, they have money, right? And so if you can get your beers into our corporate event tastings or do corporate events yourself, that's another great way. We've done, over 150 of them in the last 6 months alone. So that's a big part of what we're doing too. So I can talk a little bit about that kind of stream too.
No, I'm excited. It's so awesome that you've been so successful through all of this. Great work. Now, Matt, you're up. I always enjoy our conversations. It's great to have you on one of these today. I really enjoy your backdrop. So for everyone who's listening rather than watching, can you describe what's behind you right now?
Yes. So I'm operating out of my garage studio, as I like to call it. I've got my merchandiser beer cooler to make sure I'm always hydrated. And then my good friend who's no longer with us, Curtis MacArthur, he worked for Sweetwater for many years and is a good personal friend, and just my sort of memory of him. But I'm Matt. I'm the founder of Rhizome Productions. We're based in Nashville, Tennessee. We've been producing and executing in-person events for what would have been 10 years now, this past year. Obviously, we have made the pivot. Andrew actually was on our sort of industry show that we were doing for many months called Rhizome Live. And then additionally, we started pivoting towards virtual events, really to keep our consumer and our customer engaged on the local level. Since about June, we do 2 to 3 virtual events a month. We keep them pretty small and highly curated and bring in individual producers or multiple producers onto those opportunities. So that's sort of what we've done. And we're looking forward to the day that we can get back out there and bring 3,000 people together to celebrate beer.
Won't that be nice?
Yes, it will.
Now, I did a study in October and December through Secret Hopper, and we collected data on consumer habits. And we found that when we asked in December that guests were planning on visiting breweries essentially at a rate of 50% less as the weather got colder. So people are already going to breweries less. And another interesting study I saw released arrived in Craft Peak asked brewery owners if they were doing virtual events, still doing virtual events. And only 18% of breweries said that they were doing virtual events. Where do the three of you feel we are with the current state of, how important are virtual events in the landscape we're in right now?
I can jump in. I think virtual events are critical. I think honestly, one of the good things that's come out of this pandemic is giving us this new tool in our marketing toolbox that none of us thought of before, none of us were using before. I think the challenge with them is, when we first got started, everyone was like, cool, I'll just like throw up a camera and I'll do a virtual event with no thought or planning. And you really have to think of it just like you would think of any other marketing activity. And you have to put some resources behind it. It's not just throw a body there, grab a beer and talk. Like that's not going to get you an audience. That's not going to get you people buying things. So I think if you plan and do them right, they're incredibly valuable, but they take resources. And that's a challenge right now because people don't have the resources they had before because they're not selling as much beer as they sold before, right? So there's this chicken and the egg thing. But if you can find a way to really invest a little bit of energy and time and thought behind it, I think they're critical. And I think they are hugely valuable when done right.
Yeah,
no,
I
would agree.
with that.
Yeah, I think coming from the supplier side, you know, it is everybody when everything first happened and things shut down, just wanted to jump on and go live on Facebook or host a Zoom meeting. There was all kinds of things happening, but it was just like, okay, we're here now. What do we do? You know, we got this audience and we didn't really think this through. Like, I'm going to drink a beer, but what do you have? And just, there was a lot of confusion. And I think that's the key is really, it's like any other event. You really have to plan it out. And what is your ultimate goal? And then how are you going to get there? And I think the challenge with virtual events, it truly is the engagement. You know, we're asking people to spend more time in front of their computer than they're already doing in their day-to-day lives with everything that's going on. So how can you really stand out above, you know, just another meeting or just another virtual happy hour and be an experience? And that does take resources. It takes creativity and it takes time. And so I think I'm not really surprised to see that less breweries are doing virtual events because not everybody has the resources or the ability or the drive to want to do that. But I think the ones who are still doing them are really pushing that up. And I'm hoping we'll continue to see that number come back as people experience other virtual experiences and learn from those to create an overall better atmosphere. And that's what craft really is about, right? Learning from each other and raising the tide for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And I've been surprised to see how few breweries, at least sort of in my general geographic region, have not been leveraging the ability to do that, whether they're doing it themselves or reaching out to us or say, you know, a company like Suzanne's, you know, because as you said, you know, the technology, the resources, just like an in-person event, if you want it to look good and you want people to feel like they're building value or getting value out of it, rather, you got to put some thought into that. We've been able to sort of encourage more and more breweries in our local marketplace to get behind it, even if it's just a small component of what we're doing. But one of the things that I've seen also just from the consumer side that I think I really like, you know, Suzanne, you're up in Massachusetts. It's cold. You know, it's cold in Nashville today. We have snow on the ground. We've had a lot of people that have said to us, like, even when we can come to your in-person events, if you do these virtual events in the wintertime, we're still going to do them. And I like to see that because while there are certain resources and certain expenses that we've invested in to do these, in the big picture, to put on a virtual event for 50 people, the expenses are pretty nominal, but the value there, that direct engagement and that sort of personalization that I feel like a smaller virtual event can offer is really valuable to both the consumer and then, of course, the brands that participate. And we really have looked at it as just an opportunity to keep people engaged and connected, because that's what we all want. We all want to go sit around together and have a beer. And, you know, we found with our events that we see groups of 2, 4, 6 people around a dining room table with a computer and a camera, you know, in front of them. They may have us on mute and that's fine, but they're having a good time. And we're all seeing that together. It's different, but it's the same.
And I have to
say,
man,
I love that insight, Matt.
I was going to say, I have to say too, the whole, like, a lot of people, you know, we used to travel to go to breweries. We used to, like, we were taking a road trip to go check out this brewery. But even when that's happening, when we get back to like normal, whatever that is, hopefully soon, even when that comes back, like, I just drove through Nashville actually on my way to Massachusetts, and I swung by Tennessee Brew Co., picked up a mixed 6-pack, got it to my hotel room, and like, but I'm not going to be back there, I don't know, for a year, for 2 years, who knows? But if they threw a virtual event, now I've tried their beers. Now I'm super connected with like their fun labeling and what they do. And I would totally attend a virtual event and get their beer online if I could do that, right? So there's that, like, you get to keep.
Unfortunately, Tennessee doesn't make that easy for us.
Your brewery once otherwise, which is huge.
No, that's great. That's a great angle to look at it, Suzanne. And now what I want to do, everyone, I want to kind of dial down into who is the ideal target for these virtual events, because there's so many different personas we can look at. And over the course of the hour, I really want to go from defining who's going to be the customer or attendee to how we can actually make this really successful. So looking at the virtual market, Suzanne, you just mentioned the opportunity to visit breweries that you can't always engage with. Say you're driving through, as a perfect example, you might love that beer and love that experience. And I've had those experiences as well. And I wish I could, still interact with that brewery. So I think that's a really great option. But looking at the type of content that's out there, and Josh, you mentioned this early on, a lot of times you just get the brewery owner, brewmaster, whoever, just hop in front of a camera, go Facebook Live and just talk for an hour. Now, one of the first virtual live sessions I did on Facebook was a brewery owner from a brewery on the East Coast who's been around a couple decades, really renowned brewmaster. And what he did, he was in his cellar and he went through all the vintages he had on his shelves, which was super interesting to the ultra beer nerd. But I don't think it had that mass appeal, and I don't think a lot of people went. Who are the three of you seeing the best audiences for the virtual events in the current state of things?
I think for me, it really just depends on the goal, right? Like, I think you can hit whatever customer you're looking for, but you're building the event for that. Like, if you want to hit the ultra craft beer nerd, in my opinion, they're a lot more likely in a lot of cases to sit for extended periods of time and go through these nuanced of ingredients and hops and all these flavor notes and really dive in. And I think that's one kind of event. But I think there's another kind of event for maybe consumers who aren't that in tune with some of these nuances of beer. And in those situations, we've partnered with local artists. We'll do, hey, we're going to have, one of our partners play a couple songs, and in between songs, we're going to take that time to introduce a new beer and creating a different experience for a different customer. So I think, this is kind of a cop out maybe to your question, but I think you really can hit everybody. You just have to decide who you're going to hit for that event and really focus on it. And just know you're not going to be everything to everybody for every time you go live.
That was actually far from a cop out. You took it the direction I wanted, because it needed to be those individualized events. So good work there, Josh.
And to sort of, back that up, I think one of the things that we've seen and what we've done is, we've had the geeky events where we have people from Belgium on speaking about the Trappist beers. Whereas alternatively, we did one that focused on like regional breweries, and we called it like the party pack, because it had like every bit of swag anybody could ever want from every brewery. We did have some great local music in the middle where we had a virtual concert. Two totally different audiences, but they both, the response was the same. It was just a different deliverable. And so I think really anybody who's willing to spend an hour or two on a Saturday afternoon safely at home drinking beer with some entertainment, whether it's learning about beer, seeing music, whatever that may be, I think the sky's the limit, really. It's just, how do you reach those people when they're so used to going and buying a ticket and showing up at an event or a concert, whatever it may be, and just turning it on its head and being like, hey, guess what? You can do it at home now. You don't have to go. You don't need an Uber. You don't have to worry about a DUI. Like, it's all safe.
Yeah. And I'll also say, and this is the marketer in me, and it's always controversial and people hate to hear it, but like, people connect with people and people connect with stories. People do not connect with products. So unless you're talking to that super geeky beer enthusiast crowd, be yourself. Like, have another person, have your wife there with you if you're the brewmaster, and let them see a little glimpse into your life. Tell the founding story. Tell like that inspiration when you were like at a bar, right? Like, that's what people love, because it makes them feel like they know you as a person, and they know not everyone who drinks your beer gets to know you as a person. And that's one of the biggest benefits of virtual events, I think, is that you're almost guaranteed to get the maker, the founder, the brewer, like someone important there that everyone wants to meet every time they go to your brewery in person, but they don't because you're busy working, right? Like, so that's one of the big benefits. So tap into that like emotional connection with people, and make sure you're also not just like talking at them, and you're asking questions and you're pausing and you're letting there be enough silence and you're letting them get their questions answered instead of just telling them what you want to tell them.
Well, I think you hit a great point too. I think a lot of times people, the brewmaster is, they're a little bit of a local celebrity in this extent. They're making this great beer. It's like, man, you touch this thing that touches me. But I think another end of that is, I've spent a lot of time with brewery professionals, and some of those guys are really hard to listen to. Their brain goes different places, and as an average consumer, it's hard to follow them. So I think it's also being aware on strengths and weaknesses as a presenter to the populace, right? Like, if you're with that hyper nerdy crowd, yeah, sure, let them go. But if you're trying to get more of a layman audience, maybe have your bar star or your best beer tender or one of your marketing folks who can kind of help break up some of that and really break it down or keep them in line. Again, we want to engage with the people. And I think I've been to some where, as a beer nerd, even I'm like, man, if I didn't know what was going on, I would log off.
Honestly, that's where you want like a host or a moderator almost. So even if you want to feature your maker, have your bar star there and have them leading the conversation and like cutting them off and timing them out and saying like, hold on a minute, we have a question, right? Like super helpful. I mean, when I do my events, it's my partner and I, Evan, who's a sommelier, beer professional, all those things. And that interaction of seeing two people on screen, you don't see it very much these days. And that makes the dynamic, and it makes people feel like they can talk to you more because they see you talking to each other. So keep that in mind too, if you can do that safely.
I think that humanizing aspect.
What was that, Andrew? Sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, one of the things that we found pretty valuable that we've gotten a lot of good feedback on is if we are working with a brewery on one of these where, say, the brewer or whoever we're having on the show is actually at that brewery, not doing it, say, from home or another location, offering a virtual tour of the facility. We've gotten a lot of really great feedback there, even if it's just 5 minutes. Most people at this point, if they know anything about beer, they've probably toured a brewery, but just get to see that own brewery's equipment and what it looks like, maybe see some of the production staff if they're working. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from that. We've done that with a few of our events. So I think, again, some things you can do on a virtual event you can't do in person with a large group, which again comes back to sort of why these may continue going even when we can get back in person.
And Matt, I feel the brewery tours are something that I think is such an easy option for any brewery to do that I've very rarely seen many breweries do them. So anyone listening, I think that's definitely something you can just throw in your toolbox and just do, because it takes 5 minutes of your time and people like to see behind the scenes. And Suzanne, you mentioned people like to see the owners. Josh, you mentioned access. Give people access to things they don't always have, because that's something desired. That's how you make it exclusive. And also the humanizing aspects. I think it was Suzanne, you said, put the brewmaster's wife next to him, make the person seem real. And one of my favorite things through the pandemic is, Josh, I'm looking at your background right now. Josh has a nice bookshelf behind him. It does look like it could use a few more books, not judging you at all right now, but I want to know what you're reading. Matt, I want to know what's in that fridge. I love that mural behind you. It's fantastic. So it's a glimpse into people's lives. And I think people need that more than ever right now. And I think people will continue to need that more than ever.
Yeah.
Now, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about the demographic we're attacking. Think about the person. He's a parent. She's a parent. They have kids. They don't make it out to breweries. They're not part of take their kids to the brewery crowd, but they pick up your brewery's beer every time they go to the grocery store. How can we use virtual events to attract that person who's already bought into what your company's doing to make them a greater advocate and build that connection that they're not getting from that face-to-face action? How can we, make that person more of an advocate for these breweries?
I think it goes back to building an experience, right? And being able to communicate, expectations of that experience, like having signage, we've talked about QR codes a lot on this group, but having something that says, meet the brewer, and setting realistic expectations, or, join us for a food pairing extravaganza or whatever you want to do to really get people encouraged to want to join. Right. And so, I think it goes back to, you really have to work with a marketing team or your team, or be creative on how do we draw people's attention, because on the beer aisle, there's a lot of things to look at, so how do you get them to look at your sign or look at your social media and pause to do that? And I think that's a challenge, right? And you got to know your customers better than anybody else to be able to figure out the best way to approach that. But I think just because you do it once and it may not work as well as you would have liked, that you just stop. I think you just have to continue to innovate, which is nothing new for this crowd.
An email list.
More important now than ever.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead, Suzanne.
I was just going to say email lists are more important than ever right now. So to what Josh was saying, all these different marketing levers, like you have to keep using them, but man, build that email list, because now they're not coming in. They're not coming in person, and you need to figure out how to really make those subject lines compelling, how to get them to open them, how to not spam them, how to give them real value from your email and make them want to open it once every 2 weeks and say, what are they doing now? What's new? What can I join in on? What fun thing can I do? What new beer is being released, right? I think brewers are honestly better at this than a lot of other craft makers, because you do have new releases so often, but really leverage that email list.
Well, I think another thing too, go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, the funny thing was, you know, with our in-person events, we wouldn't overly email people. We had a lot of super just dedicated people that if it went on sale, they bought it. We didn't have to overly promote, which was very nice. And I was joking with one of our marketing sort of companies that we do some work with just this week, saying that we've sent more emails in 2020 than we probably did for the first 9 years of our business.
Yeah, sure.
Which isn't a bad thing. I mean, we've actually seen our rates go up. Our open rates have increased. Our unsubscribes have also increased, but that's natural. The more you email somebody, if they don't want it, eventually they're going to, you know, remove themselves. But through our virtual events, we've been able to obviously get new followers, and it is a lot harder when you're not selling a ticket, you know, 2,000, 3,000 tickets a couple times a year to build that list. But it is more important now than ever to use that list as effectively as possible. But also find a way to respect people's inbox and not overly do it.
For sure.
No, Matt, how often are you sending emails?
So there was a point where we were doing a weekly email, probably April through August, when we did our weekly show, every 2-day show. That's simmered down a little bit now that we're just doing 2 virtual events a month. So we probably are doing 2 to 3 emails a month right now, but we were definitely doing weekly emails for a while. The feedback was good, but it's definitely something, you know, you got to be very on point, keep them simple and short. People don't want to read a long email, they'll just delete it.
What's your best subject line you used through the pandemic?
Ooh, I'm gonna have to think about that one. I'll get back to you.
Oh, I want to hear that. You think about it over the next few minutes. I want to hear everybody's response to that one. And Suzanne, you know, how about you? You know, how much have you been emailing? And for everyone, how far in advance do you need to let someone know about these virtual events to make sure we properly plan it?
Yeah, I mean, we have a calendar of events up on our website when we have our public events going. And so we are emailing pretty regularly, but we're always driving them back to that full calendar of events. So it's not just promoting one, it's promoting all of them, and they can kind of pick and choose. But we usually promote each individual event at least 2 weeks prior, usually more like a month prior. Because we want people to order online so that they're actually, or go buy, you know, if they're local and pick it up so that they're actually drinking what we're drinking. So that's the thing too. We tell them exactly what we're going to be drinking on that show. So if they want to figure out how to get it, and if we can help them figure that out, we do, they can do it. And that makes it so much more engaging. You know, and that's one of the, I saw a question in the comment about engaging. That is one of the ways to make it more engaging, is to like give people the opportunity to be doing the same thing you're doing while you're doing it. And if you're not sharing that, that's harder to do. And it drives sales, of course, which is the point of all this.
Now, Josh, did you have something you wanted to add to that about how you guys are using your email?
Yeah, so we actually don't utilize email, which I know sounds crazy in this chat. But you know, we're a relatively large regional brewery, and I just think that we haven't really spent the time to build it out. We push a lot of stuff on social, which is really our biggest connect to the consumers and allows us, you know, has been successful for us thus far. That being said, you know, it's always something that we can look at. But I was just going to say, you know, just going back to engagement. And I think one thing is, you know, especially with these events, is everybody pushes the live, which is important, right? It allows you an opportunity to participate. But I think it's equally important if you have the ability to save these and be able to cut snippets out of them and then refer people back to them. I know we were talking to Andrew before this started, you know, a lot of the views actually end up coming after the actual event. And I think that's important as well. And a lot of people aren't looking at that. They're just looking at, oh man, I see this number in the top left and it just isn't what I was expecting. And I don't want to do these anymore. Like it can be disheartening. And so I think, you know, being able to save it and have snippets and give people expectations can allow you to gather that audience as well. So sorry, my
No, I agree with you, Josh. There's definitely value into the after views. And one thing I've seen just through my own engagement with people in the pandemic, you know, I absolutely love the email marketing because I can shoot that email in someone's box and I know they're going to either read it or they're going to delete it. They're going to have to interact with that unless they're one of those people who has 10,000 emails in their inbox. And that does happen. But with social media, you know, the algorithm on sites like Facebook is very interesting because sometimes not everybody gets shown everything. So, you know, you might post it, but not everybody might see it. So I think you need to use a combination of both channels to actively, you know, reach the target audience you're going for. But one channel I want to kind of turn to right now is you do most likely still have guests still coming into your brewery. And the odds are those guests aren't coming back as frequently as they once had. So how can breweries use their actual tap room to promote virtual events? Does anybody have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we have a tap room, right? So we're utilizing ours to promote some of our stuff. And I think the thing is, with the big push to digital menus, QR code menus, there's no reason that you can't quickly add something on there. You're not printing, 100 copies of it. So being able to push stuff that way, signage is very important. We've talked about that as far as navigating a tap room. People are getting used to looking at things and reading and looking for instruction and where to go. So finding these strategic places to just give touch points. One of the things that we do a lot is utilizing our tap room, but being in Houston and having a distribution footprint that's 5 states, we also are trying to utilize the grocery, where people are going and shopping, where they're picking up their beer. So if your primary source of people picking up your beer is your tap room, use that for signage. If the primary source is out and about, use that as well. Work with some of your local partners. I know one of the cool events that we did was partnering with a local restaurant, and we did a virtual beer and food dinner, and they got to go and pick up, heat and eat stuff. And we talked them through the heating instructions with a welcome beer and went through. And so utilizing some of your other channels as well to build everybody up. So lots of different touch points, but tap room, definitely signage, virtual menus.
Now, what's interesting with our virtual event series, we actually have only marketed it through electronic platforms. We have not done anything with like our participating breweries, even our retail partner, which is who we use sort of for people to pick up the packages. We've never even done any advertising in their store. Obviously, people are coming in at a reduced rate, but we've really kept it specifically through our social media and our emails. Really, you just see the effectiveness of that. We're not looking for huge numbers. So similarly to what Suzanne said, we're usually announcing these about 30 days out. We're, via an email and social media and the support of the participating brands, we're generally able to, check off all those boxes and get those packages sold. But I think, obviously tap rooms are open, and, there's obviously a limitation to what those tap rooms can do and what they look like depending on where you are. But if a brewery is participating and it's to their benefit that those events sell out, they should obviously be doing whatever they can to make that audience aware, even if they're just coming in to buy a 6-pack or a crowler or whatever it may be, even a keg. Make sure they know what's going on outside of the brewery. I think it's really valuable to see.
Now, I know the bulk of you have mentioned food and beer as part of these virtual experiences. Now, there's also the other hand where you have the brewmaster talking about the company's beers, but how important do you feel is having that beer to drink alongside, that food to eat alongside the host? How important is that in creating an engaging experience?
I think it depends on the objective of your event. If you're talking about the specific beers you're tasting, I think it's kind of important, that at least there's some way for people to get that if they want to. Like our events, a lot of times we spend a big bulk of our time, for our corporate events at least, teaching beer tasting techniques. And so in that instance, we do send everyone the beer when we do these. But in that instance, if they're just drinking a similar style of beer to us, that's okay, because we're just nosing it, we're tasting it, we're talking about the proper techniques, we're using the beer aroma wheel, right? We're doing all that stuff. So I think you just have to think a little bit about, like, as I'm doing this and talking about this, if they're not having a similar experience, are they going to be bored out of their mind, right? And if you think they might be, then acknowledge that in the chat and say, hey, if you're not drinking the same beer as us, sorry, that sucks. But tell us what you are drinking in the chat. Tell it, because maybe we've had it before and we can comment a little bit on that. And so doing kind of this stuff to really engage people and help them feel like they're part of it, even if they're not doing the same exact thing, is really important, I think, versus just kind of ignoring that fact.
Yeah, we've incorporated food in some way into all of our virtual events. Generally, we work with, so here in Nashville, we work with a local sort of cheesemonger that curates some regional cheeses and charcuterie, and then we've got a local chocolate maker. So we'll generally include all or some part of that into the package. And again, it builds value. Usually our packs have, 8 to 12 different beers from 4 to 6 different breweries. So we sort of coordinate that. It's not like a strict, like this cheese must go with this. We want people to sort of experience it on their own. We'll make recommendations as part of that. And then we like to include some brewery merchandise, whether it's a tasting glass or even just a bumper sticker, just, old school stuff. It doesn't matter. And also affordable for the breweries. We don't want to be asking for high price tag items. We want to respect that. I mean, of course, we're buying all the beer, from these distributors or the breweries directly if they do self-distribution. But I think that builds a value in that. And also it's something more to talk about. Similar to what Suzanne was saying, I hosted with one of my staff members who's a level 3 Cicerone. He's definitely way more knowledgeable on the tasting side than I am. And it's great for us to sort of go back and forth and really engage the guest. And the one thing that we've done on that note with the engagement side is we, with every event, we do a sort of a contest. If you submit photos of your setup to us before the event's over, whoever has the coolest looking setup, whether it's a cheese plate or whatever they're doing, we pick a winner, and then we pull a bottle from the cellar, one of the cellars, and we hand deliver it to their house. And that's been a really cool, engaging thing. And for some reason, one person has won randomly like 3 times. So, but it's just another way to engage people, and it makes them want to do it again because they know they're going to win something. And it's been cool to see that.
And I got to say, Matt, you posted some really awesome pictures that have absolutely made me hungry just looking at your company's feed. So good work with those pictures. Cool to see what people do as well.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit more about this food component. You know, forming these relationships with other local businesses is key because people love to eat and drink together. What suggestions do you have for breweries who may not be hosting successful virtual events right now with forging these relationships to make these events worthwhile and work correctly with other local partners?
Buy everything. That's the first rule. Don't ask for donations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, especially if your goal is to support local business, and then you're kind of pulling the booster club thing where it's like, hey, you know, help me out here, and hopefully it helps both of us. You know, like it's really doing what you're trying to do and have the support and encouraging people. You know, I think one of the challenges that we have is we can't do beer direct. We cannot do direct to consumer from our tap room. So we constantly have to encourage people to go out and pick it up somewhere else. And so that gives us the opportunity because if we are partnering with a local business, we're like, hey, this is the place that we're going to send them, you know? So there's benefit for that. But yeah, I mean, I think the relationships are just like anything. You got to go in and talk and have the conversation. Here's my goal. What's your goal? Is this a good fit? If it's not, that's okay. Just the top person on your list isn't always going to be the person that you do the event with. But just being able to kind of show humility and be like, look, what do you think about this? And if it works, great. If it doesn't, well, you know, move on.
And I will say,
Josh, Suzanne, go ahead.
I was going to say, I will also say, like, because I think a lot of people hear this and they're like, oh my gosh, now I have to do food. This is such a pain. Like, this is so many more resources. But the way to think about this, so when we do events, public events, we often have partners who are other organizations or multiple breweries. And so the same thing applies here. If you have multiple people who are all contributing to this event, that means all of those people are sharing this event on their social media. They're emailing it all to their email list. That should be part of your criteria of working together, is like, let's co-promote this and make a co-branded event, because now you're introducing your brewery to this cheesemonger's audience and they're introducing their audience to you, right? Like, it's hugely beneficial, and that's how you get more people to attend. That's how you grow your email list. That's how you grow your following. That's how you get more sales. So think about the benefit of the added complexity of doing these things.
Definitely. Now on to beer. You know, how much beer should you encourage or provide to someone for these virtual events? I've seen, for example, some of these virtual festivals where they send you a box of 18 high alcohol beers to enjoy watching 4 hours of content. You know, let's be a little realistic right now. Unfortunately, I can't drink that much in 4 hours. If you can, good for you. But, you know, how do we find the right amount to offer our guests while keeping it responsible from home? And what is the right amount? You know, Josh, you know, for example, or Matt and Suzanne, in your perspectives, what has been the right amount of alcohol to encourage someone to have during a session?
So to get very specific, now that we've done about 24 of these, I think 8 beers is the magic number, depending on what size, you know, the format is. Let's just say they're all 12 to 16 ounce. I think that's sort of the perfect number. And what's also nice about that is you can really market this package, whatever you're doing, as something that's good for a couple. It's good for 2. Now, we've done some events where the average ABV is 10%. Like we did a Trappist Belgian tasting, and all those beers were 10% alcohol. We marketed it as a package for 4 because most of the bottles were larger format. And it was great. We did one with Chimay, actually, where you got 4 bombers of every Chimay beer, and you got the Chimay cheese, and we had a person from Belgium on. And no one was, 2 people, they domed 4 bombers of Chimay. They weren't going to feel good. So for $100, you got 4 bottles of 750s of Chimay and all this cheese and charcuterie and merchandise, you know, proper Chimay glassware. And it was $100. So it's a huge value. You're talking $25 a person for an hour and a half experience. You know, it's very fair price, and it was mutually beneficial to the brand, myself, our retail partner. So I think when you see some of these virtual events like that are 30 beers or whatever it is, it's too much. And maybe the expectation is hopefully that event is recorded. You can kind of do it on your own pace. And we do record all of our virtual events. So if you can't do it live, you don't feel like you shouldn't buy it. But most people we find, I'd say 80% of our purchasers are on live with us. They want that live experience. But maybe they drink half the package live and then come back to the other half the next weekend or the next day.
No, that's really cool that you mentioned like the rewatchability of these virtual events, because you don't have to feel obligated to, drink, 8 beers in an hour and a half. You can go back and, listen to Matt talk about Belgian beers for the next, couple days when you have time to enjoy a beer. No, I like that. Suzanne, You're nodding your head. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, our events are an hour long. And we actually feel like 4 beers that are 16 ounces is about as much as people can handle. And honestly, even with the 4, some people are like, I'm going to drink all 4 of these beers in an hour. And so we really give people permission to say, open just 1 or 2 of them, the ones you're most excited about while you're live with us. Listen to what we're talking about. Come back and watch it later. But even with 4, we find there are some people who are like, I don't want to slam my beer. Like, I want to enjoy my beer. And we have to keep in mind, once you open a beer, you can't like reclose it and save it for 2 days, right? Like, so it's kind of like once you open it, you drink it. So we do, and in an hour, we feel like we'd be rushing it if we were trying to talk through more than 4 beers, plus do tasting techniques, plus tell about the brand story, So we actually feel like less is more. But we do sometimes send bigger packs where maybe they'll get 6 or 8, and we just talk through 4 for the tasting.
Yeah, I think it goes back to setting proper expectations. Like I'm with Suzanne, I typically stick about 4 in an hour if we're going to do like an in-depth tasting. But it depends on the overall goal. If the goal is to get exposure to these different beers, then maybe we will do a little bit more. But just saying, like, hey, I'm going to talk through all these beers. I'm going to take a couple sips of each of them and taste them with you. But I'm not drinking all of these beers. So don't feel like you have to either, and just giving people the out and the idea and the understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. Like, we want to give you guys tasting notes. A lot of times I like to use tasting books. Write down some of the things that I've said, and then you can go back and watch the recording. However you learn best, but please don't feel obligated to chug all these beers. And I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but I dump a lot of beer down the sink when I get on some of these meetings, because I know how it's going to make me feel the next day, and I got work to do, So it's giving people the understanding that I don't expect you to chug all of these beers, and don't feel like you have to. But ultimately, we want you to get your value's worth. So if we're charging a large amount, I'm not going to expect somebody to dump it down the drain, which for most of our events, there is no charge. Again, we're not selling the beer, so we're just offering the experience.
Early in the pandemic, I heard an ad on a podcast for Sierra Nevada can ship almost anywhere in the country now. And they released their Bigfoot barley wine, different years of it. You could order in a pack. You would get like 3 from each year, from 2011, 2014, 2017, and I think 2020. And you could just do a vertical at home with yourself, to try the different variants of the Bigfoot series. And when you open the package, there was a little sheet of paper at the top said, hey, we'd love for you to experience this virtually with us. You had a link where you could go sign up and enjoy the experience. And to Josh, I don't think I could have ever drunk 4 Bigfoot barley wines over the course of an hour. So I think dumping down the drain is okay. You don't want to not remember the experience. You want to enjoy these virtual experiences. But one thing I really liked the way Sierra Nevada presented it, they had a really great setup. They had multiple people who were sharing multiple details. They had a person talking about the history. They had a different person talking about the tasting notes. They had someone showing you around the brewery, and the way they did their lighting, the way that camera was working, it was absolutely fantastic. I would love to do a quick lightning round with you 3. Let's talk a little bit about lighting. Let's talk a little bit about cameras. What technical aspects should the breweries be focusing on to make sure, when I'm watching, that it's actually an enjoyable experience on my eyes and ears?
Well, I'll just say, I have not ever called myself an influencer or anything like that before. And there's a great picture that got sent around to all of our team of me in a sweater, beer all set up, a ring light. I got a little microphone. And I kind of joked with my team and said, look what you've made me into, like I didn't experience any of this, but, I do want to make sure that we're putting out a great experience. So I think it's important that if, take some time to think about your background, right? I just moved my office into this smaller space, but it's not the greatest. I wish I was at the brewery, but it works. It fits the thematic of what we're looking for. I'm using a ring light right now. I like to wear hats. I've got crazy hair. Like many people, I haven't got a haircut in a couple months. So having a light so that you can actually see my face, and thinking about some of that. And you don't have to be a professional producer or an Instagram model or anything like that. But if you can just look at the screen and say, okay, that's something I could follow with, then great. Then you're already set up, and you don't have to go spend thousands of dollars on equipment. Start small, and then as you continue to do these, and if you want to improve, go that way. There's a lot of great resources online. But I'm with everybody. Like, I had none of this before now, and my desk is quite the crazy space. So I'd love to hear more from Suzanne and Matt as well, because they have studios,
Yeah. We do 10 to 12 events a week. So we finally had to break down and really develop a studio, especially in our small 700 square foot apartment in San Francisco. But we actually did a whole video tutorial, and Andrew, I'm happy to send you the link on how to set up your studio. We actually walk you around our studio and show you. And then we have a whole Amazon list that has the lighting we bought, the cameras we bought, all that good stuff. And so there's a whole video tutorial you can watch to go really deep on this stuff. But lighting is key, critical. And a lot of breweries, you don't have great lighting. You have these floodlights coming up, down from the top. That's not great. So lighting is critical. Audio is critical. You don't want it to sound like crap. Honestly, if your machines are running in the background like crazy, that's not a great time to do a virtual event. You have to time it a little bit, think through that some. And then I will also say, be close to the camera. I can't tell you how many virtual events I've watched people where they're way back behind the bar, and because they want to show their beautiful brewery and their beautiful bar, and the camera's way back there, but you can't see them, you can't hear them, you don't feel connected to them. So you have to get past that a little bit. But it's pretty important. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to be super technical. The lighting takes a little screwing around with, depending on what's going on. It gets really annoying sometimes. This is a backdrop. I can't do the virtual backdrops because you all know by now your hands disappear when you do that. And so I talk too much with my hands.
Part of the fun.
But these are cheap and they look good. And I can't tell you how many people are like, is that a real wall behind you? That's great. So there's shortcuts and there's easy ways to do things to make it look good. And it's important that you do.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Yeah, one of the things that we've slowly done now that we've been doing these since our first events were in June, is we've been investing in some better technology. So, we started with $100 webcam, and now we bought the newest GoPro that's even better. We just recently bought some wireless lavalier microphones that we can use with Zoom. So we can get, we have these big fancy microphones that attach to the table. And so slowly we're chipping away at increasing that. And again, having a good space with good light and, hopefully no background noise. That's probably the most important thing, even if you're doing it with inexpensive equipment, is just having the right space to do it. And we've been lucky to work out of a studio where we have absolute silence and, a quiet HVAC and just no background noise. And obviously most of the platforms that are available to us have limitations in terms of their quality, like Zoom, for example. They're compressing your data and making your video not necessarily look as good. And we want the integration of our guests on there. So we're not going to use StreamYard like we are today, where we can't have 50 people tuned in. So there's some limitations that we're going to always face regardless of that, unless we want to spend $10,000, $20,000 to do, a professional production. But there's some great resources out there. I'd like to definitely see your list, Suzanne, trade some notes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that brings up a good point, Matt, as well. I think we talked a lot about equipment, but software. I think there is a lot that you have to think about in these events. I talked a little bit earlier, a lot of our events are free. I'm very hesitant to throw a free event out there where everybody can come in full video, full audio, even password protected. I've been a part, I've been a part of about 100 of different webinars and seminars over the last 6 months, and probably 150 since March. And I've been in a couple that are pretty weird. It gets wild quick, and there's nothing and it seems like it's gotten a lot better, but it's things where I'm telling my wife, hey, come over here. This is really crazy. And you're trying to close your laptop. So I think software is something that you really have to think about. And I've just recently moved over to Zoom webinar, which unfortunately doesn't have a lot of the face-to-face, but for some of our larger free events, it allows me a little bit more control versus something that I'm doing with a trusted group, a corporate event, or something that you have to actually sign up and register for. So I think you have to think about that as well. What are the potential worst case scenarios that can happen, and do you have a plan to mitigate those? Do you have a moderator? Are you using a waiting room? Do you have somebody who can kick things off so that you can still try to hold your composure? And I think that's another thing that you just have to think about and figure out what works in your situation.
Wow, there's absolutely so many different aspects of these virtual events that we could talk about, and you guys have all given great advice so far. Now, Matt, I want to ask a little bit more serious and personal question. What are your suggestions for controlling children who may be in the background?
You know, actually, as a dad of two, you know, my kids, thankfully, they're not with me when we host the virtual events. But we do have a lot of families that are doing these virtual events with kids in the background. It's been a lot of younger kids that maybe aren't mobile yet, which is totally cool. It's nice to see that we can give young parents an opportunity to drink some beers in the safety of their home with kids around. And you know, we use Zoom for all of our virtual events. Kendall, as well as being sort of our expert Cicerone, he also sort of moderates Zoom and mutes and unmutes and has the waiting room under control. And most people are really respectful of that. You know, we encourage people to engage. We want to hear what they have to say. But I think we've just sort of set the bar of what our expectations are, that a lot of people, when they come into the event, they feel like they understand what's going on. You know, we want them to say hi, but then we mute them all. And then at random times, they'll see that we've unmuted everybody because we want that engagement. We want that interaction. You know, perfect example is when we have our musicians perform. You know, we want them to be clapping when they complete a song. We want them to say, "Oh, wow, that was awesome." So, you know, you set that expectation early, and I think people get it. But we like seeing kids in the background. You know, normally we don't let kids come to our in-person events. We're 21 and up only. So it's been nice that we, you know, maybe people who can't come to our events in person anymore, you know, before the pandemic, now can re-engage with us because the kids are at home. So I think that's actually been a benefit to a lot of our people.
No, I absolutely love that. And so far we've talked about, you know, finding that target audience for your events, how to promote it, how to prep with regard to food and drink. Now we're actually at the event. We're beginning to talk a little bit more about engagement. And that's one of my biggest keywords. Before pandemic, during the pandemic, engagement is absolutely huge in craft beer. Everybody's nodding your heads. I love it. So let's talk about strategies for engaging virtually. What have you three seen to be most successful to kind of get the person who's at home enjoying your event to actually feel like they're connected to you? How can we have that human component? But Matt, like you also said, set those expectations where they understand there's a time and a place. What are the strategies you three have seen to best facilitate that engagement?
I mean, I think the setting expectations is one of the biggest pieces of it. So one of the documents I just sent you, Andrew, has like our kickoff notes and kind of like what we always try to hit on whenever we kick events off, because so many people start their event and are just like, all right, we're drinking beer, let's start drinking beer, and there's no expectation setting. So we always kind of set the expectations of, listen, we can talk to you for an hour. We don't want to do that. You have more fun if you're talking to us. We have more fun if you're talking to us. Unmute yourselves, throw it in the chat. And then we do explain, like Matt said, there are going to be times where we mute everyone. That's not us telling you we don't want to hear from you. We're just trying to control background noise. We're trying to make sure everyone can hear everything. And then asking a lot of questions. And so, but when you ask a question, you have to pause and you have to be comfortable with silence for 30 seconds or so, because it takes people a minute to find the button to get on there, right? So you have to just be comfortable with that. And then like, it's okay if no one engages and like start to roll with it. You know, but it really is just continually reminding them that you really do want that. If you're not walking that talk the whole event, they're going to be like, yeah, they said they wanted to hear from me, but they don't. Also, plant a few seeds. If you seed a few plants, whatever that saying is. If you know some people in there, tell them directly, message them privately, and be like, please ask a question, whatever it is, make a comment, do something.
Yeah, the chat's important.
Start seeing some people doing it, all of a sudden everyone does. In the beginning of your meeting, ask everyone to put where they are, what they're sipping on, get people writing in the chat right away. So it's up to you to get them to engage. It's not up to them, honestly.
Now, Suzanne, what do you suggest? Like, say you have 30 seconds of awkward silence if no one's commenting. Do you have any go-to lines you like to throw out there to try to get people to, you know, take the steps to engage?
I mean, we get kind of playful, especially since it's two of us, you know, so we can kind of make faces at each other and be like, all right, looks like we have a shy group here. Beer drinkers aren't normally shy. You know, what's going on? Clearly you haven't drank enough yet. Like, you know, like, so we kind of joke about it. And then we'll do the like little, like, don't make us call on you one by one. We're not above that, you know, like, so we kind of just start to like tease, and then we let it go and we move on, and then we do it again 10 minutes later, you know, so.
No, great advice.
Yeah, I mean, I like to set the expectations like teach,
to
not preach. Teach, not preach, right? Like at the end of the day, you guys don't want me to just sit here and talk at you for an hour. And so, you know, if you have questions, I always encourage the chat. I also like to set the stage that I talk loud and fast. So sometimes I can, and I have to constantly work on not doing that, but I just move in, especially as I get a couple double IPAs in me. And so, encouraging people to use the chat, but then also reminding myself, you know, like, and rather than doing it at the end, I'll ask for questions and say, you know, it's time for me to take a sip. And then I can take, you know, that 30 seconds, that awkward silence. And I'm taking a sip. I can see others, if the videos are on, of them taking a sip. And it kind of has that natural break. But I think you've got to learn how you're going to do that. I don't think it can feel really awkward. And I've seen people who you can tell they've been coached on it. And it doesn't seem weird, or it seems weird. So you have to kind of figure out your natural rhythm to it. And I think the more that you do it, the more exposure you get, the better you'll be. But it's not that dissimilar from doing an event in person, doing a presentation in person. The challenge is the lag. And so you just have to kind of slow things down a little bit more to kind of deal with the lag. But once you start to figure out how that feels, the awkwardness goes away. And just remember, it's more awkward for you as the host as it is for anybody else. So as long as you can just have humility, no one is going to worry about it. You're going to focus on it way more than anybody else does.
I think that can also be helpful if you do have someone with you and you've talked about this beforehand. Like, you know, it's my partner, Evan, and I. So he knows if I'm grabbing his leg under the table, it's like, you've been talking long enough, or don't start talking yet, or just, you know, so we have cues, and set that up with your team, you know, or use the private message behind the scenes to be like, all right, you're going on a tangent. It's been going on long enough. Cut it. Because we're all super passionate about what we're talking about. And someone can ask us a very simple question about hops, and then 20 minutes later, we're still talking about it, right? And so we have to like self-moderate ourselves a little bit in that regard.
I think that's a great addition, Suzanne.
Yeah, and the other thing I was just going to add to that, one of the things that I think been valuable with our events is if we have, say, 4 breweries that participate, we sort of give each of them a timeline of when they're going to be part of that virtual event. And, you know, the audience is theirs for 5 minutes, 7 minutes. And we engage as well, but we really let them sort of take it and run with it. And I think that helps people's attention stick because they're not hearing the same voice for an hour straight. They're not hearing the same topic for an hour straight. It provides a variety. And we've been calling them kind of variety shows internally because sometimes we've got 6 to 8 different people, aside from myself and Kendall, hosting, that are on the show with us. And I think that really helps, especially our events usually are 90 minutes to 2 hours actually. And people don't leave. And in fact, we have to end it and be like, hey guys, we're done. So
we have the same thing. Our public events are 90 minutes and some of them have gone 2.5 hours. We call it the after party, like the super enthusiasts.
Exactly.
Kind of out. And it's crazy to me that there's 30 people hanging out for 2 hours on a Zoom chat. You know, like people like
the beer helps. The beer helps.
No, that's so true. These hour-long sessions, they go by so quick, it's leaving you just wanting so much more. And with the engagement we're talking about today, obviously the engagement's really important during the session, but the goal is to make anyone involved, anyone enjoying your stream, to want to engage more with your brewery following. What tips do the 3 of you give for, you know, encouraging anyone watching to sign up for a mailing list, although you probably have their email address if they signed up for the event, or purchasing more beer? Are you dropping a link in the comments during these events? What are the best tips you can give to any brewer to kind of make the connection last longer than that hour, hour and a half, or Suzanne, 2.5 hours?
I think the key is to ask, right? Hey, follow us on social media, connect with us, comment on this post, or comment on our post on Facebook and tell us what you thought. Call to action is the marketing term for it, but you have to have that. You know, we're doing these events because we want to engage. For me, I just miss drinking beer with people. So it makes it nice because I'll easily stay on for 2 hours because my wife gets really tired of me talking about nuances of beer. She's like, great, Josh. So again, I think it's just having in the back of your head, what is my goal? And even if you have to put a Post-it note on your computer and say, don't forget to say this, sign up for our emailing list. And then you get a little bit of confirmation. Follow us on social media. Here's my email address, which I know some people are a little hesitant to give out, but I give out my email all the time. It's like, if you have questions about Karbach or beer as a whole, shoot me an email. You know, I'm one of those guys, I hate to see the little number next to the email app, and I will get back to you likely within an hour, even if it's at midnight, because I'm probably up sipping on something. So Again, building that connection and that relationship is really, really key. But again, you got to go back to your goal. You're not always going to have the same call to action at the end of every event or virtual event. So keeping that in mind and just, again, going back, what is my goal? Who is the audience I'm talking to? And what's the best way that we're going to be able to further connect?
Yeah, and I'll just add
I agree with that.
Great point. Just to add, keep in mind, everyone who starts at your event is not going to be there at the end of the event. So I would suggest actually doing the calls to action at the beginning and at the end, and really like talking to them about, we're super excited to be here with you. This is how you can engage with us further. Do that at the beginning and the end. And then also, we always have an email queued up and ready to go the next morning. That's thanking them for being there, has the links to buy beer, has the link to our next event. Like that next morning, while they're still on their high for like, man, that was really fun last night, it's scheduled, it's ready to go. Plan ahead for that too, I think is a great way to capture clicks and links and, all that good stuff.
I was going to say the same thing. We usually actually, if we haven't drank too much ourselves, we usually actually send a personal email, not like through our email platform, just through, whatever email platform we use, Gmail, to each individual person that participated. And we include all the brewery representatives on that email. So it's really personal. It's very informal. It's just like, hey, thank you for doing this. Everybody who participated today is on it. Feel free to hit us back with any questions. And we'll say, oh, and here's a reminder of the breweries that participated. And to see the back and forth, just because it is so personal, it's really great. And the reps that we've worked with from the breweries have really appreciated that, because it is probably the closest thing that they're going to have to talking to somebody at their booth at a beer festival, which obviously isn't, or at their tap rooms, which isn't really happening like it used to be. So
yeah, Matt, those extra touch points. Those touch points go a long way, just trying to find ways to stay in touch. Now, Matt, before you have to go, where is the future for virtual events over the next year in your mind for Rhizome? What do you expect?
So our plan for now, definitely through at least the first half of the year, is to have 2 virtual events a month, if not more. We're really pushing them to be more unique and not just about beer. So we're doing one, for example, in February that involves a local sake producer who also makes dumplings, who also makes beer. So I'm looking forward to that one. So we're going to keep pushing these, trying to make them different. We're talking about potentially taking some of our events and virtualizing them, some of our in-person concepts, which we haven't really been doing thus far. These are all unique, one-off opportunities. My hope is maybe early fourth quarter, some of our in-person events can return, maybe even at a smaller format. But as Suzanne is probably familiar with, there's a point of diminishing return. If you can't have your full attendee numbers, it kind of doesn't make sense. But I see these as a great opportunity forever. I don't think they're ever going to go away, and I don't want them to go away, because if anything, even with our busy scheduled in-person events, let's say come 2022, this is a nice way to do something on a weekend where we may not be working, and keep our consumer engaged and do unique opportunities that don't require travel, that don't cost our company $100,000 before we ever even touch the ground. The events industry, regardless of beer, music, it's expensive as hell. These aren't, and there's something refreshing about that, and less risky and scary. So I like that, but I think it's the future. I'm ready for it.
Cool, Matt. No, I've appreciated you being here today. For anyone interested in seeing what Matt's doing, check him out, Rhizome Productions. Reach out. I'm sure he'll love to answer any of your questions, but he's doing killer events. I know you have to go, Matt, so thank you for tuning in today.
Nice to meet you guys.
Chatting again soon. Now, Suzanne, I want to turn it to you. You've talked so much about having virtual events in your marketing toolkit. It's a phrase you've used multiple times, and I absolutely love it. Because like Matt mentioned, even when the world gets into a better place, these are still really valuable events to do. What do you think is going to be the state of things, like Matt mentioned, later this year, and how valuable will virtual events still be?
Yeah, that's one of the big unknowns, right? Like I think all of us can say, we hope they're here to stay. I mean, we have a whole article on our website that's like 5 reasons why we're excited virtual events are here to stay. And we hope they are, because they're awesome. I mean, we're reaching more people every week than we ever could, especially because we're not a brewery. We don't have a place for people to come, right? So we think they're amazing. We think they're a great way to get in people's homes, have emotional connections, really solidify their loyalty to your brand, which is what this is all about. So we think they're great, but in-person events are going to start to come back. So there's going to be a balance, and you're going to have to start to figure out what objective these are serving versus what objective in-person events are serving. And I will just say, think about national, think about regional, think about people who don't live in your neighborhood aren't coming to your brewery all the time, right? So it's a great way to reach a broader audience. We're going to keep doing these. We're doing 2 to 4 free public virtual tastings a month. And then we do probably about 10 corporate events a week. So we're busy, and we don't see any sign of them slowing. We have clients calling us saying, how do we book the next 6 events? So people are hunkering down for this. People are expecting that we're not going to be traveling anytime soon. We're not going to be, doing live conferences anytime soon, things of that nature. So I think double down, figure it out now. If you haven't figured it out already, get on in there so that when life does get back to normal, you can keep doing a few of these, once we were in that stage.
And I want to add to that, even if you have tried virtual events and they didn't seem like they were successes, try them again. Suzanne and Josh and Matt can give you a lot of great tips, because worst case, you're sitting at home on a Tuesday night, you try a virtual tasting, try to build it. You have to build it. You'll eventually see some traction, I believe. And these folks can really help. Now, Josh, what are your thoughts on?
They're going to be frustrating the few times you do them. You can't expect the first time you do them, they're going to be great. There's going to be 10 people who show up. You're going to feel like it's not worth your time. You got to keep tweaking and playing, just like with any marketing activity. The first time you put a Facebook post out there, it didn't go gangbusters, right? So it's the same idea.
No, I absolutely love it. So Josh, with regard to Karbach, what are your projections for what you guys will be doing over the course of, say the next year?
I think for us, it's really going to be consumer driven. If the consumers want it, we're more than happy to do it. And I think that's been one of the best parts about my experience as a host of a lot of these is I'm getting to connect with people that maybe don't have the ability to go to their local beer festival, or don't have the ability to come to the tap room, or didn't even know who to reach out to, or any of that. There's all these different reasons. So it's allowed me as a representative of the company, and really just a lover of beer and somebody who wants to continue that passion, or share that passion with others, I should say. It's allowed me to connect. So I think there's always going to be a need for that connection, and people are going to desire it. So I don't anticipate them going away. I think, you have to make a conscious decision on how much effort it's worth to an extent. But, at the end of the day, I've done trainings where you show up and there's one person there, and that's effort as well. So you can't always be scared of the what ifs. You just kind of have to dive into it. But, I think for us, we're definitely going to continue to at least offer them. And if we start to see a sharp decline, then we'll reevaluate. But I don't think, and especially in our footprint, it's very challenging for me to get to every event, let alone one of our reps or even our state reps. So it's allowed us to do some great things. And I'll say, as somebody who digests this information, I attend these events. One is because I want to see how they're going, but 2, I love the information. I've been able to connect with some industry professionals that I may only see once a year. And now I can jump on their live chat and I can learn as a consumer as well. And so I hope they don't go anywhere anytime soon. I just hope we continue to innovate. I have no doubt that this industry has the ability to innovate and make these events great.
No, I love it, Josh. Thanks for sharing all that. I'm excited to maybe someday have a private tasting with you where I'm enjoying your beers as you guide me through them. Now, I asked you earlier today, and I'm going to come back to it, so hopefully you won't get mad. Give me that good subject line that you have used that have caused people to click and want to come to one of your virtual events, or make one up on the spot.
So, honestly, I pulled up my data real quick to see what my best subject line was over the year, which is interesting. And honestly, it was when we announced that we were doing these. So it was like, virtual tastings are here. That's all the subject line said. It was virtual tastings are here. And we got like a 60% open rate.
Wow.
So, people are excited about these things, and especially if you're not talking about them regularly and that's not your subject line every week. I think, just letting them know, like, we're here for you. Let's come have fun, drink a beer with us, right? Things like that are really engaging.
No, yeah, I think for me, it's like, look, I don't need an excuse to drink, but if you need one, here it is, come share a beer with friends and like-minded individuals. And that's been one of the great things. I definitely miss that. And there's been times where I've gone on some of these sessions and I've stayed for 2-3 hours. Heck, I was on a training session the other day. A couple of us are prepping for advanced Cicerone. And next thing we knew, we were like, man, that was a quick way to burn 5 hours. So people want that engagement. They want to have these conversations. So it's here's a ticket to the pub. You know, it's not the same. We're not all at the same place. We're not all able to toast, but we can have a good time at the same table virtually, and share the same experiences like we were at the pub. And I love that. And so here's your excuse to crack a beer.
And I do think, Josh, something that you just said that I think we're all under leveraging and not pushing this angle enough is get your friends in other locations to join too. All of you guys come Thursday night and have a beer with us and have a beer with each other, and like starting to leverage these as ways to hang out with your group virtually with some entertainment there, right? Like I think that's an angle, like friends night, date night, like all that kind of stuff that I haven't seen a lot of us, myself included, like pushing that enough yet. And I think people are getting sick of just having to Zoom with their friends and being like, what are you up to? What are you doing? How's it going? Let's talk about COVID for 3 hours, right? Like, so I think giving them something to do with their friends is compelling.
Well, and being strategic as well, right? Like as much as I love on a typical normalcy, you know, to be able to hang out with my buddies every Thursday, I don't think doing a Zoom happy hour every Thursday is going to be the ultimate success strategy, right? It's knowing when to leverage them and then making it an experience. You know, I think that's the thing is we've talked a lot about engagement experience, but you can do these regularly and you're going to touch different people, but just kind of letting it go where it goes. I think that's the other challenge is people have these like really stringent agendas. They're like, we need to get through all of this. And that's where you turn people off. If you just kind of let the conversation happen, you're going to have a lot more success than trying to stick to the timeline that you sticky noted to the side of your computer.
For sure.
And Josh, one word you mentioned a minute ago. One word you mentioned a minute ago, Josh, is passion. I think people really enjoy seeing passion. When I see you excited, I get really excited, even if it's just through a camera. So I think that's a huge aspect of these virtual events, in addition to the engagement, in addition to the experience. And as the weather continues to get colder in most of the country, people won't be going to breweries, unfortunately, as much as they already had been or at those levels during the pandemic. So we have to give them alternate ways to have that sense of, you know, connection with other people. So I really appreciate you both being here today, just sharing your experiences. I appreciate Matt being here as well. So thank you for tuning in. Hopefully the feedback and insight you both gave today, along with Matt, can help others just continue to put out great virtual experiences to the rest of the pandemic. We will be having beers in person before too long, hopefully, and I can't wait to share one with both of you. But I think these virtual events will definitely be something we continue to do. So thank you both, and see you hopefully soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.